I'm home alone, and typing this approximately an hour after tonight's occurrence. At 11 PM, there was a rapping on our front door. My parents are away, and I'm babysitting my little brother for the night. I'm 16. When I crept up to the peephole and looked out, I saw a very old, shivering woman on the doorstep. She was in an open white robe in 43-degree weather, and it looked like she was scared. After a minute or so of assessing the situation, I cracked the door with the chain still attached, and this is when I nearly fell back. She lunged at me and squeezed her face into the little crack and asked me in a quivering voice, "Have you seen my baby?" Frantic and unhinged in her demeanour, wide-eyed and aloof, she began pushing on the door, trying to force it open. "No, I haven't. Do you need me to call the police?" Suddenly, nearly slicing into my face, she shoved a retractable blade through the crack and began trying to stab me. When I finally slammed the door in her face and ran to call the police, they came, looked around, and found nothing. "Call us if she comes back," he said, before walking off the front porch and driving away in his cruiser. I sat in the living room in pitch darkness and silence, listening, looking around, waiting for her to return. I text my parents, but I assume they're asleep. After 20 minutes, I suddenly saw a light flick on out of the corner of my eye. The motion sensor at the back porch. I ran to the kitchen, and very hesitantly, my veins pumping adrenaline and heart punching my breastbone, pulled aside the curtain, and once again almost fell backwards and screamed. The old woman with the crazed, wild eyes and matted white hair was dragging the knife slowly up and down the window as it squealed like nails on a chalkboard. She soon stepped back, displaying a plastic baby doll in her arms, and flashed me a toothless grin before walking backwards through the yard with a crooked gait and disappearing into the trees. I called the police again, and again they found no trace of a psychotic old woman shuffling around the neighbourhood in near freezing temperatures. However, after they left, I shone my phone light on the window I found her behind and realised she'd been writing something the entire time. Lucky I found her. I locked myself in my brother's room for the rest of the night. Below me, I kept noticing the floodlights kicking on and going off, but I didn't want to look. This happens often because of the animals we live around, but tonight, I think it was something else. However, at one point, they switched on again and stayed on for over 5 minutes. This only happens if something is lingering in place underneath it. Though it was barely audible, I swear I heard that screeching sound several more times. Perhaps I'll see what it reads in the morning, but I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. This next story will be narrated by the awesome, deadly Cure. I'll link their channel below in the description. Please check out his channel and subscribe for more terrifying content.
I was home from college for an entire semester. I had developed relentless insomnia, and I just needed a break from living with 5 other guys. I got a job at Rite Aid, immediately hired on as a shift supervisor. Unfortunately, the closest store was in a relatively crime-ridden part of town. I had been working there for 4 months, and this particular night, my manager left me to my own devices. "You gonna be alright?" he asked repeatedly, and I assured him I would. It was exactly 8 PM when he left. I had to reorganize some shelves anyway, and the store was empty. At one point, I heard the door ding, and I went up front to assist. It was a young woman, probably in her 30s. She asked me some innocuous question about something we very obviously didn't have, like a cell phone or something. After apologizing for the inconvenience, She asked me a rather odd and admittedly unnerving question. "Is it just you here?" Obviously, I answered, "Yeah." Mistake. 15 minutes later, another woman entered, sporting multiple gold chains, bracelets, sunglasses, despite it being nighttime, and hot pink hair. She stopped and just stared at me, not saying a word. She quickly asked me if she could speak to a manager about a receipt, and I told her, again in my ignorance, "He's not here." She marched out quickly. We close at 10 p.m. It was now 9:50. I had already counted down the drawers and pulled out our $1,000 till in preparation for doing the deposit inside of the locked office. In the midst of this, noticing the time, I decide to take one last jaunt out to the parking lot to make sure no more customers were coming before locking up. I walked through the first set of sliding doors, through the vestibule, and out the second set to the sidewalk. Directly across from the entrance sliding doors was a pillar next to a garbage can, and leaning against it was a tall young gentleman staring into the store with a cell phone up to his face. I quickly glanced at him out of my peripheral before walking to the edge of the curb to scan the parking lot. I was feeling extremely uneasy, and dread was pulsating through my veins, but I tried to be passive and not directly pay attention to him, but something just felt off. Why is he staring into the store at closing? I passed him on my way in, and by the time I entered the store and turned around, I was being followed behind by the same guy, now with a bandana over his face and a gun pointed at my stomach. I put up my hands, but he instantly countered with, "Put your hands down and open the drawers." Okay, I replied, shaking, palms sweating. He subsequently followed inches behind me, with the muzzle of the gun pressed against my back. "I have kids, man," I said, lying to save myself, hoping for empathy. But I had already seen his face unmasked outside, so I assumed there was a good chance I'd become another random casualty in a crappy neighborhood. "Just open the damn registers." I did as he said, but I was in a world of pain because the registers had both already been counted down, and we only keep $50 in them during off hours in the form of change. A few ones, but a couple of fives. "Put it in the bag," he muttered with cold indifference. I dropped in all the cash from both registers, and that's when he hit me with a terrifying statement. "I know there's more." Inside I was screaming, veins throbbing, asking God for some divine intervention. The most horrifying moments of my life. I wasn't about to die for just minimum wage at Rite Aid, so I led him to the office, where the till drawer was already out on the desk. Down in the safe was a counted out deposit of $3.5 grand inside a zipped leather bag. In the till drawer was $1,000. "Here, this is all the rest I have." I prayed he didn't think or know about the separate deposit, so I took my chances. "Bring it out and dump it in the bag." I walked ahead of him as he pressed the gun even harder into my lower back, carrying the drawer to what I presumed would be my death. I saw his face. "He's going to kill me," I kept telling myself in my head. Marching to my likely doom, I could only comply, and I dumped it in. "Now, keep going," he said with that cold, psychopathic disposition, until we were back in front of the doors. I went quietly, and he turned to face me, aiming the gun at my head. And then he said, "Don't call police. Wait 10 minutes." He slowly backed out of the store and then ran off. I exhaled the biggest sigh of relief I've ever experienced. I stood there, frozen for about 30 seconds, before walking to the register and falling to the ground, seated, leaning against the wall. I called my manager and then police. Finally, after 5 minutes or so, I needed to run to the front entrance doors to lock them and pull down the gate. This was the most frightening part of the entire ordeal. Walking inside of a lit-up store towards a door leading out into pitch darkness. For all I knew, he had 3 guys out there waiting for me to get close before filling me with holes. I pulled the door shut and threw down the gate in what had to be record time, locked it, and nearly had a breakdown. Eventually, my manager, 3 police cruisers, and an unmarked SUV showed up. I was questioned for an hour by a detective, and they took the video footage evidence. By the next day, this guy was all over the PD's Facebook page, underneath the headline of $4,000 reward for information leading us to the assailant. I quit the next day and got a job at the mall in a more upscale area. But I'll end this one with one thing. It's been 15 years, and still unshakable in my soul was having seen the armed robber's face and believing quite positively for about 10 minutes that there was no way he would leave a living witness. I thank God that I was wrong, and also thank the Lord that he didn't know about the deposit and that I denied him nearly $4,000. Maybe there was some sort of intervention after all.
I'd like to start by saying a big thank you to everyone who continues to support my channel. I'd also like to give a special shout out to the following: Jacqueline Vrooman, Shaz Fashion Nation, Marina Kaiser, Deadly Cure YouTube, Dr. Grimm 666, Tales by the Campfire, Mr. Barlow, Shrenik Bodana, Apurv, Janice, Pablo Del Segunda, Mia Mina, The Library of Horror, Lily Rose, Your Ex-Husband, Matthew J. Bauer, Let's Read, and Skullface Horror Stories, Ahmed V, and Casey Baisley. If you have a birthday coming up, or you just want to shout out at the end of the video, please check out our Instagram for further information. Thank you.